brightest, trained in the ancient traditions of combat not for warfare, but for discipline and strategy. Their admiration for the history of their species' martial legacy was a mark of their status, yet none had ever seen actual war. Word had spread among the students of a recent discovery, a derelict outpost on an abandoned planet in a distant system. The planet was known as Earth. The excitement in the hall was palpable. This was no ordinary outpost, it held the remnants of human history, a civilization long forgotten and dismissed as primitive. The students had heard of humans only in passing, their legacy little more than a curiosity from an era long gone. The outpost's discovery on Earth had been accidental. A deep space probe had detected energy readings from a sector that had been thought lifeless for millennia. Earth, once teeming with intelligent life, was abandoned after environmental collapse and societal decay. Humans had vanished, leaving behind little more than ruins. Still, the probe had found something, a lone structure, seemingly undisturbed. The archive it contained was left unguarded, untouched by time. No one had known why this outpost remained when all else had been destroyed, and the decision to investigate was made quickly. For these alien students, the outpost represented a rare glimpse into a lost species, one whose combat traditions could, perhaps, offer lessons or insights unknown even to them. The students arrived at the outpost, their sleek transport settling on Earth's barren landscape. The atmosphere was thin, and the once vibrant planet was now a husk, its cities reduced to dust and debris. The outpost itself stood intact, a simple structure but emanating a strange, almost reverent energy. Upon entering, they found themselves surrounded by technology that, while primitive by their standards, carried an air of sophistication in its design. The walls were lined with terminals and storage devices, all connected to a central hub. At first glance, the archive seemed unremarkable, a collection of data about a species that had long ceased to exist. But as they delved deeper, their skepticism grew. Humans were known for their violence and chaos, their history marked by conflict. What could they possibly teach the students of Vrek, whose combat traditions were defined by precision and honor? One by one, the students activated the terminals, and the archive came to life. Holograms flickered, displaying information on wars, battles, and the art of human combat across millennia. The advanced technology of the archive allowed them to immerse themselves in these events, watching as wars unfolded in vivid, brutal detail. The students exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of it. Humans, it seemed, had not fought for honor or discipline, but out of necessity, greed, and desperation. As the archive unraveled, the students found themselves stepping into the past, into a history unlike any they had studied. They witnessed ancient combat, primitive humans battling with stone weapons, their survival hanging in the balance. As the years progressed, the scenes became more complex. In medieval times, humans fought with crude armor and swords, their conflicts driven by power and conquest. By the early modern period, wars were waged with gunpowder and cannons, entire cities razed to the ground in the pursuit of victory. This was nothing like the combat traditions of Vrek. The students were unaccustomed to such disorder, such raw emotion. Yet there was something undeniably compelling about it. The archive revealed not just strategy and tactics, but the very essence of what it meant to fight as a human. These battles were not simulations or exercises. They were real, and they were fought with a passion that the students had never witnessed before. As the students explored the archive further, they arrived at a period of human history dominated by global wars. The world wars captivated their attention immediately. The sheer scale of the conflicts was unlike anything they had encountered in their own studies. Tens of millions of lives were lost, entire nations were consumed by war, and the strategies employed were as relentless as they were innovative. The students were particularly struck by the technological advancements humans made during these times. Tanks, planes, and eventually nuclear weapons, each escalation more devastating than the last. They could scarcely believe how quickly humans had adapted their technology for destruction. The strategies employed during these wars fascinated them. The coordination of air, land, and sea forces was something that, while basic in comparison to Vrek's level of sophistication, displayed an impressive level of organization for a species that seemed driven by chaos. Key battles, such as those on the Western Front or the naval confrontations in the Pacific, showed a level of persistence and tactical thinking that earned the students grudging respect. While these wars were brutal and senseless in many ways, the innovations birthed from necessity stood out: mass production of weapons, advancements in communication, and the emergence of intelligence networks all contributed to the human ability to wage war on a massive scale. As they moved further into human history, civil wars and revolutionary battles provided a more intimate view of humanity's internal struggles. These wars weren't fought for global dominance but for ideals, power, and survival within nations. The American Civil War, the French Revolution, and countless other uprisings showed just how divided humans could become when their values clashed. Here, the students saw a different kind of warfare, one steeped in personal conviction and sacrifice. It wasn't just armies clashing on battlefields. It was neighbors fighting against one another, often for survival or the hope of a better future. The moral dilemmas faced by human leaders in these wars intrigued the students. Decisions to free enslaved populations, overthrow corrupt governments, or stand up against tyrannical regimes required a kind of personal sacrifice that wasn't as common in their own society. The humans, in their willingness to fight and die for freedom, for revolution, or for loyalty to a cause, showed a resilience that surprised the alien students. Even when faced with insurmountable odds, human factions displayed a determination that seemed to go beyond mere survival. It was a fight for identity, for the future. Their journey through the archive then turned toward the covert operations and guerrilla tactics humans employed, especially during times when traditional warfare wasn't feasible. These were wars fought in shadows, where a small, under-resourced group could defeat much larger forces through ingenuity and persistence. From the resistance movements in occupied territories during World War II to the guerrilla warfare seen in Vietnam and across many other conflicts, humans had mastered the art of fighting unconventionally. The students marveled at the adaptability of human forces, their ability to blend into their environments, use whatever resources were available, and turn the tide of war not through overwhelming strength but through strategy and subterfuge. Covert operations, like intelligence gathering, sabotage, and the disruption of supply chains, showed a level of cunning that was both admirable and unsettling. It wasn't just about overpowering the enemy, it was about outthinking them. The students had never witnessed a species that thrived so much in unpredictability. Humans, in their most desperate moments, became even more dangerous. Their ability to adapt to situations where they were outnumbered or outgunned showed a survival instinct that the students had not anticipated. The archive revealed countless examples of small groups using guerrilla tactics to slowly erode their enemy's strength, until victory was possible. To the students, this was perhaps the most baffling aspect of human warfare, the willingness to endure and outlast, even when the odds seemed impossible. The alien students found themselves engaged in deep debate as they absorbed more of the human combat archive. Discussions turned toward the ethics of warfare, something the VREC had long codified. In their society, conflict had strict rules, and wars, when fought, were highly controlled, with minimal harm to non-combatants. But human warfare was different, messy, chaotic, and often brutal, with civilians frequently caught in the crossfire. The students struggled to comprehend this. How could a species so advanced in some ways allow such destruction? Some argued that human wars, while destructive, were often driven by necessity, fights for survival, freedom, or justice. They pointed to wars fought against tyrannical regimes or to liberate oppressed people as examples where the chaos of war seemed justified. Others weren't convinced, finding it hard to reconcile the vast civilian casualties with any noble purpose. The bombing of cities, the use of chemical weapons, and the mass displacement of people felt to them like a failure of humanity's moral compass. Yet some saw these acts as unavoidable consequences of war on such a grand scale, where every action had far-reaching consequences. The discussion grew even more complex as they delved into human attempts to regulate war. Treaties, conventions, and international laws designed to limit the worst aspects of warfare were all attempts to inject morality into combat, yet they often failed in practice. This fascinated the students. The human tendency to create rules even in situations of complete destruction spoke to a deep internal struggle, a species that recognized its own flaws but couldn't fully escape them. Shifting their focus to the strategic elements of human warfare, the students began to see the brilliance hidden beneath the chaos. Many human military strategies, though imperfect by VREC standards, displayed an incredible adaptability and ingenuity. Blitzkrieg, for example, impressed the students with its speed and precision, a near-perfect execution of overwhelming force in a short span of time. The idea of concentrating all available resources into a single, decisive blow wasn't new to the students, but the effectiveness with which humans applied it in World War II left them in awe. They were equally impressed by the concept of attrition warfare, where humans would exhaust the enemy over time rather than defeat them in a single battle. While this went against the students' sense of honor and efficiency, it was undeniably effective in many human wars. They compared these strategies to their own species' combat doctrines, which focused on efficiency, minimal losses, and strategic elegance. Where VREC battles were short and decisive, human wars often dragged on for years, with victory achieved not through flawless execution but through sheer persistence. One student, in particular, found herself reflecting deeply on her assumptions about combat. She had always seen warfare as a matter of precision and honor, an art form where both sides respected a set of unspoken rules. But the human way of war challenged that belief. Humans fought for survival, for freedom, and for reasons that didn't always align with traditional notions of honor. This student began to see that war wasn't just about tactics or victories. It was about the raw emotions and stakes behind it. Humans fought with passion, often sacrificing themselves for causes greater than themselves, even when the path was unclear or morally ambiguous. Another student, who had always valued the clear structure and order of VREC military traditions, felt uncomfortable with the complexity of human warfare. The chaotic nature of it, the moral compromises, and the emotional toll on soldiers left him questioning whether his own society's approach to combat was too rigid. Was there something to be learned from the human ability to adapt and endure in the face of overwhelming odds? He found himself grappling with these thoughts, realizing that his own understanding of warfare might be more limited than he had believed. The archive had shown them more than just strategies and battles. It had forced them to confront the very nature of conflict itself, the thin line between survival and destruction, and the moral weight of decisions made in the heat of war. Their view of combat, and of themselves, would never be the same. Without warning, the peace on the alien home planet of VREC was shattered. A hostile force, unknown and merciless, descended from the skies, attacking with a brutality the VREC had never faced before. The invasion caught them completely off guard. Their defensive systems, built for controlled and honorable skirmishes, crumbled under the sheer force of the enemy's assault. The sky darkened as the invaders' ships blotted out the sun, and the once calm streets of their cities erupted into chaos. The VREC forces, trained for precise and calculated combat, found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy that fought with unrelenting aggression. In the first hours of the attack, confusion reigned. VREC's traditional strategies, focused on quick, clean victories, failed. Their forces were systematically outmaneuvered, their rigid formations unable to withstand the unpredictable and savage tactics of the invaders. As cities fell and communication lines broke down, panic began to spread. The VREC, for all their technological advancements and peaceful ways, had never prepared for a war of this scale and intensity. The very foundations of their society, based on order and discipline, seemed to be unraveling. Amid the chaos, the students who had studied the human archives realized that the conflict unfolding before them bore eerie similarities to the wars they had studied. The invaders were using tactics that resembled the ruthless, overwhelming force seen in human history. The students, once mere observers of combat, now faced the harsh reality of war firsthand. It was time to apply what they had learned. The turning point came when one of the students, recalling the blitzkrieg tactics from the human archives, proposed a radical shift in strategy. Instead of relying on traditional methods, they would adopt a human approach: speed, surprise, and overwhelming force at critical points. Small, mobile units were dispatched to disrupt the invaders' supply lines and communications, a tactic lifted directly from the guerrilla warfare and covert operations the students had once marveled at. This hit-and-run strategy confused the enemy, slowing their advance and giving the Vrek forces time to regroup. Another student, remembering the human concept of attrition, suggested targeting key infrastructure rather than direct combat. By attacking the invaders' energy sources and logistics hubs, the Vrek could weaken their enemy without costly head-on confrontations. This strategy, unconventional for their species, began to pay off as the invaders' war machine slowed down, unable to sustain its momentum. The alien students, once reluctant to embrace the chaotic nature of human warfare, now saw its value in a real-world crisis. Human ingenuity in desperate situations became their guiding principle. The students also applied the human lesson of adaptability. Where Vrek commanders were used to following rigid, top-down orders, the students encouraged decentralization. They empowered smaller units to make decisions on the ground, mimicking the flexibility of human forces in the face of uncertainty. This shift allowed the Vrek to outmaneuver the invaders, who had expected a more predictable, traditional defense. Slowly but surely, the tide of battle began to turn. As the conflict dragged on, the students found themselves not only making tactical decisions but moral ones as well. They had learned from the archives that the cost of victory, especially in human wars, often came with ethical dilemmas. Civilians were at risk, infrastructure was being destroyed, and the line between combatants and non-combatants blurred. One student, who had been particularly affected by the human debates on the ethics of warfare, insisted on minimizing harm to civilian populations, even when it meant delaying critical strikes. This decision reflected a careful balance between strategic necessity and moral responsibility, a lesson taken directly from their study of human history. In another key moment, the students had to choose between launching a preemptive strike that could decisively cripple the invaders but would also risk massive collateral damage. After much debate, they opted for a more measured approach, combining both the precision of Vrek strategy and the adaptability learned from humans. Their decision reflected not just tactical brilliance but a deep understanding of the moral complexities that warfare inevitably brings. Through these experiences, the students' academic understanding of human warfare transformed into practical wisdom. They had seen how humans, despite their flaws, had learned to survive in the face of overwhelming odds. Now, those lessons were keeping their planet from total destruction. The invasion eventually came to an end, not with a decisive battle, but through the gradual wearing down of the hostile forces. The invaders, having underestimated the adaptability and resilience of the Vrek defenders, were forced to retreat. As their ships disappeared into the void, the planet lay in ruins, scarred by the brutal conflict. The rebuilding process began immediately. Cities were reconstructed, but there was an undeniable shift in the society that emerged from the ashes. The Vrek, once devoted to controlled and orderly warfare, now understood the value of flexibility and adaptability in conflict. Their rigid doctrines had been broken, replaced with a more dynamic and pragmatic approach to both warfare and diplomacy. The planet's leaders recognized that the invasion had exposed weaknesses in their military traditions. They began to reevaluate their diplomatic strategies as well, knowing that the threat of future invasions could not be ignored. Warfare, once seen as a formal exercise, was now understood to be a volatile and unpredictable reality. The alien society shifted towards a more balanced approach, one that blended their refined combat techniques with the practical lessons of survival learned from the human archive. Diplomacy became more proactive, and alliances were strengthened to prevent such an attack from happening again. The lessons drawn from the Human Wars archive became an integral part of the Vrek military's future. Training programs now included human-inspired tactics, teaching cadets how to think creatively under pressure and adapt to unforeseen circumstances. The doctrine of controlled chaos, borrowed from the human playbook, was integrated into their strategies, encouraging flexibility, quick decision-making, and unconventional thinking when faced with overwhelming force. Beyond tactics, the archive's emphasis on the human spirit of sacrifice left a lasting impression on the Vrek. They had seen how humans, time and again, fought not just with weapons, but with willpower and determination. The Vrek gained a new respect for this relentless pursuit of survival and victory, understanding that war was often less about technical superiority and more about the resolve to endure. This appreciation of human warfare wasn't just academic, it transformed the way the Vrek approached their own military, placing a renewed focus on morale, resilience, and the human ability to find strength in the darkest of times. For the students who had studied the archive, the invasion became a defining moment in their lives. They had moved from theory to practice, applying what they had learned about human combat in ways that not only saved their planet but also reshaped their understanding of war. The crisis had forced them to mature quickly, to face the harsh realities of conflict, and to make decisions with real consequences. No longer just scholars, they emerged from the invasion as seasoned tacticians and strategists, their perspectives broadened by the complexity of what they had experienced. One student, in particular, took on a leadership role, helping to integrate the human lessons into the new military doctrine. What had once been an intellectual curiosity had now become a central part of her identity. She, along with her peers, understood that the future of their planet's defense depended on their ability to remain adaptable, to anticipate chaos, and to respond with both strategic brilliance and ethical responsibility. The personal growth of the students mirrored the evolution of their society. They had come to appreciate not just the technical aspects of war, but the emotional and ethical weight that came with it. The moral dilemmas they faced during the invasion had pushed them to rethink what it meant to be a warrior and a leader. The students' respect for human ingenuity and sacrifice deepened, and they became advocates for a more nuanced, flexible approach to warfare, one that blended the best of Vrek traditions with the hard-earned lessons of human history. As the Vrek began to rebuild and look toward the future, the students knew their roles were just beginning. They had a hand in shaping the next generation of military leaders, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated, and that the lessons learned from the Human Wars Archive would continue to guide them. They had seen firsthand the importance of balancing strategy with ethics, of blending precision with creativity, and of respecting the unpredictable nature of war. Their future was one of cautious optimism, built on the hope that they could prevent another invasion by being both stronger and wiser. In the end, the students left their mark on a world forever changed. The Human Archive had taught them that survival was not just about technology or tradition, but about the spirit and ingenuity of those who fought to defend what they believed in. The Vrek, now armed with a deeper understanding of war and peace, were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, inspired by both their own legacy and the enduring lessons of human history. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. I promise you, nothing will happen to your finger.